Well, welcome to another episode of the Electric Bison, where we're talking a little bit about nuclear power at the nuclear weapons base in Great Falls at Malmstrom. And I'd like to start with that. It's been announced that there'll be a small modular nuclear reactor going into Great Falls for Malmstrom's Air Force Base reliability for the missiles up there. It's really not a small modular reactor, it's a micro reactor. It's not 350 megawatts, it'll be on the order of 5 megawatts. And it will have with it a grid forming, included with a grid forming inverter, which will allow it to make its own MicroGrid up there in the Great Falls area for the missiles and the control centers. I find that really interesting because with the infusion of large data centers coming into Montana that are asking for power from Northwest Energy, that we really have to think through what we're going to be doing here. And for example, for all the reasons that Malmstrom Air Force Base wants more reliability for its sensitive missions, Helena is the command and control center for Montana. We have at Fort Harrison, we have the hospital out there, but we also have the command and control center for the military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Guard. And we have the same thing in Helena. You know, we have the Capitol. There might be a need for the legislature to be in session. Certainly we have the governor and Supreme Court for our state. And then we have more hospitals, and then the support area around East Helena, where everybody's moving to that lives in these places. So I feel like we need to seriously look at having a microgrid in Helena to make sure we keep the lights on if the broader power grid becomes unreliable. I checked into what happened with the 1.8 gigawatt outage in July of last year, 2025, in Data Center Alley, which is up in Loudoun County in Virginia, Northern Virginia. They've got the largest concentration of data centers in the world, and they had a bad outage. And what happened is about nearly 2,000 megawatts, 1.8 gigawatts of data centers suddenly went offline because there was a short somewhere in the transmission system in that part of Virginia. They went offline and went to their emergency backup power. And what that did is it caused there suddenly to be too much power being generated in the grid, the broader grid, by the Virginia utilities. And they needed time to get those turned off, and it caused an outage. It almost damaged their equipment. They were able to avoid a cascading outage, but it was a close call. And there have since been several meetings and orders from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission trying to get at that problem, saying that perhaps these until we figure out an answer, these new large loads should be interruptible, which is what the Southwest Power Planning Council, SPP.org, if you want to look it up, has been doing for the entire western United States. They're accepting new large loads to come on, but until we find a way to support them firmly or without risk, they have to be treated as interruptible loads. And but up here in Montana, the 11 loads they're asking to come on are not talking about being interruptible at all. They want to have firm service. So we have quite a complex situation here. And in Montana, we're talking about numbers easily as large as the Data Center Alley. You know, we're talking about a lot of data centers up here, a lot of megawatts of electricity use, such that, for example, the transmission line from Great Falls down to Billings, it may have to serve the big data center at Broadview. And then what happens with Billings? And then what happens is the coal strip plants that are serving the load centers out in Seattle and Portland, when they start to terminate? What happens with all their transmission capacity going west? Is it going to be used for a different direction of power flow? A lot of change, and change not just of that kind, but change technologically, because when I was a public service commissioner for 12 years back in the 1980s, early 1990s, it was just then trying to move over to begin to treat the gross power system, the national power system, which has 3 sections. Treat it like we would the power system inside a computer, only it's on a very large basis. And they were talking about silicon switches. And since then, there have been a number of developments that I find very interesting. Since 2000, for example, there's been the creation of these grid-forming inverters, which if we were collecting up community solar around Helena, for example, it would go through a grid-forming inverter, and then we would all be on the wavelength of that inverter. When I showed you these solar panels earlier, I was pretty happy having them, but now I'm realizing that I had the wrong impression, and I left with you the wrong impression, that if the utilities system starts to island, starts to become unreliable, then these inverters that I have don't work very well. You have to have a grid forming inverter to help this inverter that I have work the way it's supposed to. So there's 2 kinds of inverters. I got the wrong kind. So right now, in the meantime, what I'll be doing is putting more batteries on our system, because if the lights go out here, we just need to have more battery storage until we can become part of a microgrid, or until the main grid comes back on. Those kind of issues, I'm sure, that will be talked about with this new large load tariff that's been proposed. In today's Public Service Commission, there'll be interveners, and they'll be talking about this kind of stuff. But we all need to start thinking about it. I did a question to AI. I asked, what's more expensive, having a 5 megawatt micro nuclear plant like the one they're talking about in Great Falls by 2030, or a similar sized microgrid run by an inverter just gathering community solar? Community solar is about half as expensive. But then if you want to have it as, more reliable through the night, through the cold days, you got to have more batteries, and that starts to drive up the expense per megawatt hour. But the nuclear is more expensive right now until they make a lot of them. So that's the world we're living in. I'm hoping that those nuclear missiles are gone by the time they get the reactor built, and then the people in Great Falls will have a really good deal for their microgrid. Anyhow, that's all I got for you today. Take care.